the Apache girl who was sold as a slave and ended up being the cowboy's wife. She was born into the open skies and endless plains of the Apache lands, where the wind whispered stories through the tall grass and the sun painted golden paths across the horizon. From the very beginning, her life was one of freedom. She could run barefoot across the soft soil, her laughter carrying over the hills as her family moved together with the rhythm of the seasons. Her father was a strong man, wise and gentle, respected among the people for his courage and fairness. Her mother, patient and kind, taught her everything a young girl needed to know: how to prepare food, recognize herbs, and understand the songs of the birds. From them, she learned not only survival, but the deep connection between the people and the land that had nurtured them for generations. Every morning, she woke to the sounds of nature. The soft cooing of doves, the rustle of the wind through the trees, and the distant howl of coyotes became the symphony of her childhood. She would follow her mother to the small gardens they tended, picking vegetables and herbs, while her mother explained which plants healed and which were dangerous. Even at a young age, she felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, as if it spoke directly to her heart. Life was simple, yet it held a beauty that she could feel in every breath. The tribe valued every member, and she grew up surrounded by children who became her closest friends. They played games that mimicked the hunts and adventures of the adults, running through the fields with bows made from branches and arrows of soft wood. She learned to track footprints, recognize animal calls, and understand the signs of the changing seasons. Her father would often take her on short trips into the hills, teaching her how to listen to the land, how to sense danger, and how to move quietly like the deer they sometimes followed. These moments were more than lessons. They were bonds that tied her to her people and to the wild world around her. Evenings were a time of stories. Around the fire, the elders would speak of their ancestors, recounting tales of bravery, wisdom, and love. The girl would sit close to her mother, eyes wide, drinking in every word. She learned of heroes who had faced overwhelming odds and of women who had shown courage and cunning in times of hardship. She was inspired by these stories, imagining herself one day carrying the same strength and wisdom. Her father would sometimes tell smaller, lighter stories, making her laugh until her sides ached. These fireside moments filled her with warmth and a sense of belonging that she never questioned. The seasons shaped her childhood. In the spring, she would watch the land awaken, flowers blooming and rivers swelling with snowmelt. Summer brought long days under the sun, where she learned to fish in the shallow streams and swim in hidden pools. Autumn was a time of gathering and preparation, collecting nuts, drying meat, and learning the patience needed to survive the winter months. Winter was harsh, but it was also a time for reflection, for sitting by the fire and listening to the wind howl across the plains. She learned to endure, to find comfort in small pleasures, and to appreciate the quiet moments as much as the lively ones. Her tribe was close-knit, and she felt the love of her family deeply. Her mother would braid her hair each morning, humming soft tunes that seemed to echo through the land. Her father would take her hand during the evening walks, teaching her the stars and the stories they held. She knew each corner of their territory, every hill and stream, every tree that had been marked by generations before her. These familiar sights became her world, and she felt secure in the knowledge that her family and her people were always near. Yet even in these early years, she noticed the whispers of change. Travelers from outside the land sometimes passed near the tribe, and their strange ways and foreign tools sparked curiosity and caution. The elders spoke quietly about new laws, new settlers, and the shifting balance of power. Though she was young, she sensed the tension that threaded through these conversations. Still, the days were long and filled with learning and laughter, and she allowed herself to remain in the present, to soak in the beauty of a life that felt untouched by the worries beyond the hills. Her curiosity was insatiable. She would wander with the older girls and boys, exploring the hills, the forests, and the streams. She learned to recognize which berries were safe, which herbs could heal a scratch or a fever, and which plants should never touch the skin. She watched the hunters track deer and rabbits, learning the quiet patience it took to follow a trail without disturbing it. Every lesson felt like a treasure, a secret knowledge that she carried with pride. She began to understand not only the land but the ways of her people, their customs, their dances, and their songs that echoed through the valleys. Music and dance were central to her childhood. During celebrations, she would join the others in rhythmic movements, her small feet stomping the earth as drums beat steadily. Songs told of love, loss, bravery, and hope, and she learned them all, repeating them until the words and rhythms became part of her. These dances and songs were not just entertainment, they were lessons in identity, resilience, and the joy of community. Through them, she felt connected to her ancestors and to the generations that would come after her. Friendships were formed in simple yet profound ways. She laughed and played with the other children, sharing stories, games, and dreams. Together, they imagined adventures, creating worlds where they could be heroes and heroines, always protected by the strength of their tribe. She learned to negotiate, to stand up for herself, and to care deeply for others. Even at a young age, she understood loyalty, respect, and the bonds that held the tribe together. These friendships became her support, her joy, and her inspiration. Through all of this, she grew aware of her own spirit. She was strong, curious, and brave, though she sometimes questioned if her courage was enough. She watched the adults handle challenges with patience and wisdom, and she absorbed their lessons, practicing them in her own small ways. Every day was an opportunity to learn, to explore, and to grow, and she embraced each one with an open heart. She felt the freedom of her life as a gift, precious and rare, and she cherished it deeply. But even in the most peaceful moments, the world beyond her home was shifting. Rumors of conflict, settlers pushing further into the lands, and tensions between different groups began to filter through the community. The elders spoke cautiously, warning the young ones to remain vigilant while also encouraging them to continue learning and growing. She didn't fully understand the dangers, but she could sense the weight behind the words. Yet, she held tightly to her life, her family, and her freedom, believing that the bonds she had with her people and the strength within her would carry her through anything. Her life at this point was the perfect balance of freedom, learning, and belonging. She woke each day to the rising sun, worked and played with energy and joy, and rested at night with the stars above, feeling protected and loved. She did not yet know the trials ahead, but she carried within her the foundation of courage, resilience, and wisdom. These early days, so full of light and life, were the roots from which she would one day draw strength when everything around her began to change. And so her childhood continued, filled with laughter, learning, and love. Each day brought new lessons, new discoveries, and new joys. She ran freely, sang her songs, and listened to the stories of her ancestors, absorbing the wisdom and courage they offered. Though the winds of change were beginning to stir on the horizon, she lived fully in each moment, unaware of the hardships to come, but already building the spirit that would carry her through them. In these simple, beautiful days, the girl from the Apache lands was learning the first, most important lessons of her life. The power of family, the strength of her people, and the unbreakable connection between herself and the land she called home. The girl's life, once full of laughter and freedom, began to change in ways she could not have imagined. The winds of her peaceful world started to shift, carrying whispers of conflict and danger from lands beyond her home. Travelers passed near the tribe more frequently, bringing news of strangers, laws, and new settlements that seemed to push closer to her people's lands. Her parents spoke softly at night about these changes, trying to shield her from the weight of worry, but she could sense the tension in their voices. Even as a child, She noticed the looks exchanged between adults, the serious discussions held in hushed tones, and the cautious glances toward the horizon. One day, a small group of outsiders came near the edge of the Apache territory. They were armed and stern, their presence unsettling the animals and the people alike. Her father warned the children to stay close to the village, to be careful, and to trust only the familiar. The girl felt a strange fear that she had never known before. The wind seemed heavier that day, carrying a chill that had nothing to do with the season. Though she tried to play as usual with her friends, a quiet unease settled in her chest. She clung to the comfort of her family, sensing that something important, something frightening, was approaching. It was during this period of uncertainty that she was first confronted with betrayal in its cruelest form. A man not fully understood by the tribe came into their midst offering promises of safety, goods, and protection. He spoke kindly, appearing trustworthy, and some adults listened. The girl, innocent and curious, did not fully grasp the danger. Her family, despite their vigilance, was eventually caught in a situation that spiraled beyond their control. One moment they were together, safe and secure. The next, chaos erupted. In a sudden and shocking twist, the girl was separated from her family and taken away from the only world she had ever known. She was forced to leave the familiar hills, streams, and forests behind. Every step away from her home felt heavy, as though the ground itself was pulling her back. She looked over her shoulder, hoping to see her parents' faces, but they were gone, replaced by strangers who treated her as something less than human. The fear that had whispered at the edges of her childhood now roared into her heart. She cried silently, tears staining her cheeks, as she struggled to understand why this was happening. The world she had known, the one filled with freedom and love, seemed to vanish in an instant. The journey to a new and unknown place was long and difficult. She was moved from one location to another, often without explanation, and every day brought new fears. The men and women in charge of her treated her coldly, expecting obedience without question. She learned quickly that resistance only brought harsh words or punishment. Though she was frightened, something inside her refused to break. She remembered her mother's lessons, her father's guidance, and the strength of her people. These memories became her shield, giving her small moments of courage when the world seemed overwhelmingly cruel. Life in this new place was harsh and unfamiliar. She was given tasks and duties that tested her body and spirit. Her small hands were called upon to work tirelessly, and her young mind struggled to comprehend the ways of the strangers around her. They spoke in a language she did not fully understand, and their customs were confusing and sometimes frightening. But she watched carefully, learning quickly, for she understood that survival depended on knowledge and adaptability. She carried with her the quiet dignity of her childhood, holding onto her sense of self even when the world tried to strip it away. Though the work was demanding and the days long, she discovered moments of observation and reflection that kept her connected to who she was. She watched the people around her, noticing patterns in their behavior, listening to their words, and finding ways to protect her inner self. At night, when the work was done, she would close her eyes and remember the sound of the wind through her home hills, the laughter of her friends, and the warmth of her mother's hands. These memories became a sanctuary, a private world where she could be safe, even when the outside world was harsh. Even in her fear, she began to see the complexity of human nature. Some of the strangers were cruel, yes, but others were merely weary, struggling with their own lives and challenges. She learned to distinguish between those who sought only control and those who had the capacity for kindness. Small gestures, a gentle word, a shared piece of food, a quiet act of understanding became precious. They reminded her that not all people were unkind and that trust, though difficult, could sometimes be placed carefully. These lessons were painful, earned through observation and experience, but they helped her navigate the new world she was thrust into. Isolation became a companion, but it did not crush her spirit. She often sat quietly, thinking of the life she had lost, yet she refused to let grief consume her entirely. She imagined the hills, streams, and forests of her homeland, tracing them in her mind as if mapping a secret escape. She whispered the songs of her people when she thought no one was listening, keeping her heritage alive within her heart. In these moments, she discovered a resilience she had not fully realized before. The girl who once ran freely across the plains now ran in her mind, chasing memories and dreams, refusing to surrender her identity. Over time, she became skilled at observing and understanding the world around her. She noticed details that others overlooked, the way people's eyes moved when they lied, the subtle shifts in tone when someone was upset, the small signs that revealed truth in the midst of deception. These skills became tools of survival, allowing her to navigate difficult situations with intelligence rather than fear alone. She learned to anticipate challenges, to stay quiet when necessary, and to act only when it was safe. In a world that sought to control her, her mind became her most powerful weapon. Despite her youth, she began to develop a quiet courage that inspired those who paid attention. Some of the older children and workers noticed her determination and resilience. They saw how she endured hardship without losing her inner strength. Though she was still a child, she carried herself with dignity, refusing to let despair define her. She understood that the world could be cruel, but she also understood that strength, patience, and observation could create a space of safety even in the harshest circumstances. Even as she adapted to her new reality, she never forgot her family. Each day she remembered her mother's gentle hands, her father's firm guidance, and the love that had surrounded her in her early years. These memories were bittersweet. They brought both comfort and pain, but they also fueled her determination to survive. She promised herself silently that one day she would honor her past by living with courage and grace, no matter what the future held. As months passed, she began to accept that her life had changed in ways she could not control. Yet, even in this acceptance, she carried hope. She understood that hope was not a guarantee of safety, but a choice, a decision to believe that life could hold beauty even after loss. She held onto small joys, moments of quiet reflection, and fleeting kindnesses from others. These became anchors, helping her maintain a sense of self in a world that often sought to erase it. Through all the hardship, she never stopped dreaming. She imagined returning to the hills of her childhood, running across the streams, and hearing the songs of her people once again. She dreamed of freedom, of a life where she could laugh without fear, and of a future where she could define her own destiny. These dreams were fragile yet vital, sustaining her when the present felt unbearable. They reminded her that her spirit, though tested, remained unbroken. Her story in these months of hardship was not just one of suffering, it was also a story of growth. She learned patience, observation, resilience, and the power of memory. She discovered that strength could be quiet, that courage could be subtle, and that even in captivity, the human spirit could remain free. She became more aware of her own capabilities, more attuned to the emotions of others, and more determined to survive without losing herself. In this difficult chapter of her life, she planted the seeds of endurance and hope that would carry her forward in the years to come. Even as she faced the cruelty of being taken from her home, she began to understand that life was unpredictable and complex. People could be both kind and harsh, danger could come suddenly, and freedom could be fleeting. But within her, a quiet fire burned, a fire lit by the love of her family, the lessons of her tribe, and the resilience of her own spirit. This fire would not be extinguished, no matter how dark the path ahead seemed. And so, in this chapter of her life, she walked each day with caution, strength, and an unspoken courage. She adapted, observed, and learned, holding onto the lessons of her past and the hope of her future. Though taken from the world she loved, she carried it within her heart, a private sanctuary that no one could take away. In the midst of fear and uncertainty, the girl discovered the depth of her resilience, the power of hope, and the unwavering strength of her spirit, a strength that would guide her through the trials yet to come. Life in her new world became a daily test of endurance. The young girl had learned to survive, but survival alone was not enough. She had to navigate a world that seemed designed to suppress her spirit. Each day brought work, expectations, and the constant reminder that she was far from home. The labor was exhausting, but she faced it with quiet determination, remembering the lessons of patience and resilience taught by her parents. She understood that complaining would not change her circumstances, so she focused on what she could control: her thoughts, her attitude, and her ability to learn. The people around her were a mix of kindness and cruelty, and she quickly learned to read them. Some were indifferent, focused only on their own concerns, while others tried to assert power over her in small, subtle ways. She discovered that observing behavior closely could protect her from unnecessary harm. By paying attention to tone, body language, and even silence, she could anticipate danger or find small opportunities to ease her burden. Her intelligence and alertness became tools of survival, as vital as her hands and her strength. At night, when the work was done and the world grew quiet, she often found herself reflecting on the past. Memories of her childhood, of laughter among friends and the warmth of her family, became treasures she clung to in the darkness. These thoughts were both painful and comforting. They reminded her of all she had lost, but they also reminded her of all she had gained: knowledge, resilience, and the ability to endure hardship. She began to understand that even in captivity, she could maintain control over her inner world, and this realization gave her a quiet strength that no one could take away. Over time, she started to adapt to her surroundings in practical ways. She learned the routines of those around her, the patterns of work and rest, and even the moods of the people who held power over her. She discovered small ways to make life slightly easier for herself, whether by completing tasks efficiently or by finding moments of rest when no one was watching. These small victories were significant. They reinforced the idea that, even in a harsh world, she could influence her own experience. Each day, she grew more confident in her ability to endure and navigate her circumstances. Her mind became her refuge. When the world seemed harsh and unyielding, she would imagine herself back on the plains of her childhood. She pictured the wide-open skies, the soft grass beneath her feet, and the laughter of her friends. She repeated the songs of her people quietly to herself, feeling the rhythm of their words as if they were a shield against despair. This inner world became a place of strength, where she could be free even when her body was confined. It was here that she nurtured hope, a fragile yet vital flame that guided her through the darkest days. Despite the harshness, she began to notice small acts of kindness around her. Some of the people she worked with showed patience, offered a smile, or shared a word of encouragement. These moments were rare, but they had a profound impact. They reminded her that humanity existed even in unexpected places, and that trust, though difficult, could sometimes be placed carefully. She learned to recognize these gestures and to respond with gratitude, understanding that kindness could be a powerful force even in a world that often seemed indifferent. She also developed a keen sense of strategy. Understanding that her survival depended not only on strength but also on intelligence, she learned when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to act. She observed the routines of her captors, the habits of the workers around her, and the subtle hierarchies that governed daily life. By understanding the rules, both spoken and unspoken, she was able to navigate challenges more effectively. She became adept at predicting outcomes, avoiding trouble, and finding opportunities where others saw only hardship. Friendships became a source of strength. Though few, they were meaningful. She found allies among the other children and workers, forming bonds of trust and mutual support. Together, they shared stories, whispered secrets, and offered comfort in moments of fear. These relationships were lifelines, reminding her that even in a world designed to isolate her, connection and empathy could still exist. Through these bonds, she learned to rely on others while maintaining her independence, a delicate balance that would serve her well in the future. Education, though informal, became a key part of her survival. She absorbed the language, customs, and behaviors of the people around her, not to forget her own culture, but to navigate her new reality more effectively. She became fluent in understanding not only words but intentions, tone, and subtle cues that others might miss. This skill allowed her to communicate safely, avoid conflict, and even influence situations to her advantage. Knowledge, she realized, was a form of power, a tool that could protect her when physical strength alone was not enough. Emotionally, she faced a delicate balance. She could not allow herself to succumb to despair, yet she could not ignore the pain of her circumstances. She learned to compartmentalize, to feel sorrow and hope simultaneously, and to draw strength from both. Her grief for the life she had lost coexisted with her determination to survive and thrive. In this emotional complexity, she found depth and resilience. She became aware of her own strength, discovering that courage was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and unwavering. The seasons continued to pass, marking the slow passage of time in her new life. Each season brought its own challenges, whether in the form of harsh weather, increased work, or emotional trials. She adapted to each one, drawing on the skills and knowledge she had accumulated. Winter was particularly difficult, with long nights and cold days that tested her endurance. Yet even in these moments, she found small comforts: a shared fire with a friend, a moment of rest, or the quiet beauty of snow falling silently across the landscape. These small joys reminded her that life could still hold beauty, even in hardship. Through all these experiences, she began to develop a sense of identity that was independent of her circumstances. Though she was no longer in her homeland, she carried the values, lessons, and spirit of her people within her. She realized that her identity could not be taken away, no matter how much the outside world sought to control her. This understanding became a foundation of inner strength, a core that no external force could erode. She was learning not only to survive, but to thrive in spirit, even when the body was confined. Her resilience attracted the attention of others. Some adults and older children noticed her intelligence, patience, and quiet courage. They respected her ability to endure hardship without losing her composure. This recognition, though subtle, was empowering. It reminded her that even in a world where she had little control, her character and actions could influence how others perceived her. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as an active participant in her own life, capable of making choices that would shape her future. She also began to develop a sense of empathy and understanding for others. Having experienced fear, loss, and hardship, she became attuned to the struggles of those around her. She offered comfort, shared small kindnesses, and observed the emotions of others with sensitivity. This empathy became a source of strength, allowing her to build connections and navigate complex social situations. It reinforced her belief that even in a harsh world, compassion could survive and even flourish. As the months and years passed, she matured into a young woman with remarkable resilience, intelligence, and emotional depth. She understood the complexities of the world she now inhabited, and she had developed the skills to navigate them effectively. Her childhood had been disrupted, but in its place, she had cultivated a remarkable strength and wisdom. She had learned that life was unpredictable and sometimes cruel, but that her spirit could remain free and strong regardless of circumstance. Through all of this, she never abandoned hope. She continued to imagine a life beyond her current circumstances, dreaming of freedom, connection, and love. These dreams were fragile yet vital, sustaining her through difficult days and inspiring her to endure. She understood that hope alone was not enough. It had to be paired with courage, intelligence, and resilience. By combining these qualities, she prepared herself for the next chapter of her life, whatever it might hold. In this period of her life, she became more than a survivor. She became a strategist, an observer, and a quiet leader in her own right. She understood human behavior, navigated challenges with intelligence, and maintained her emotional balance under pressure. She carried the lessons of her past and the dreams of her future in her heart, shaping her into someone who could endure even the most difficult circumstances. This chapter was not just about suffering. It was about growth, resilience, and the development of a character that would carry her through the challenges ahead. And so, the girl moved forward, day by day, learning, observing, and adapting. She survived the harsh realities of her world with quiet determination, drawing strength from memory, hope, and the inner fire that no one could extinguish. She began to understand that life, even when cruel, could be navigated with intelligence, courage, and patience. And in this understanding, she prepared herself for the changes and opportunities that lay ahead, ready to face the next chapter of her life with strength and dignity. Life had settled into a routine of endurance and observation for the young Apache girl, yet deep inside, she longed for a spark of hope, a glimpse of kindness in a world that had so often been harsh and unforgiving. She had learned to navigate the daily challenges, to read the people around her, and to preserve her inner strength, but the days were long, and moments of warmth were rare. Then, unexpectedly, her life took a turn that she could never have imagined, one that would bring both uncertainty and the first signs of hope she had felt in years. It happened on a clear morning when the sun was just beginning to rise over the hills. She had been sent on a task to the outskirts of the property where she was held, carrying supplies and messages between the adults in charge. As she walked, carefully observing the surroundings to avoid trouble, she noticed a figure in the distance, a cowboy tending to the animals. He was tall, rugged, and moved with an ease that suggested both strength and experience. There was something calm in the way he handled the horses, something that stood out in contrast to the harshness of the other adults she knew. Their first interaction was brief and cautious. The cowboy noticed her immediately, perhaps sensing her alertness and quiet dignity. He did not approach roughly or with command, as others often did. Instead, he spoke in a calm voice, asking simple questions about the task she carried. At first, she responded with guarded politeness, wary of any kindness that might hide danger. Yet there was something different about him, a warmth that was genuine, a curiosity that seemed respectful. For the first time in a long while, she felt the faint stirrings of trust. Over the next days and weeks, their interactions increased, though always limited by the routines and constraints of her life. He would offer a kind word when others were harsh, a small piece of advice when she seemed uncertain, or a quiet smile that suggested understanding rather than judgment. She began to notice that he treated her differently than the others. He recognized her intelligence, her attentiveness, and her resilience. He did not seek to control her. Instead, he seemed to respect her spirit. This recognition was a foreign but comforting feeling, one that brought a small flicker of hope into her otherwise rigid and controlled existence. The girl found herself observing him with curiosity. He was not perfect. He had his own struggles, his own worries, and moments of sternness, but there was a consistent thread of integrity in his behavior. He was patient, measured, and willing to see her as more than a task or a responsibility. In turn, she began to adapt her own behavior, learning to communicate carefully, to trust selectively, and to share small pieces of herself without fear. Each interaction became a delicate dance of observation, trust, and cautious connection. As the days passed, she noticed small gestures that deepened her understanding of his character. He would ensure that the animals were cared for properly, often taking the time to teach her small skills about handling the horses, guiding her hand when she was uncertain. These moments were more than lessons. They were expressions of patience and respect. She began to see that he valued her not for obedience or convenience, but for her presence, her intelligence, and her effort. This recognition stirred feelings she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time: trust, respect, and even admiration. One afternoon, as they worked together tending to a group of animals, a sudden challenge arose. One of the horses became frightened, bolting unexpectedly. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, but he reacted swiftly, steadying the horse and instructing her calmly on how to help. She followed his directions, her hands shaking slightly, and together they managed to calm the animal. In that moment, she realized something profound. She could rely on him in ways she had not thought possible, and he relied on her as well. There was a partnership forming, quiet but significant, built on trust and mutual respect rather than force or command. Their bond continued to grow, slowly and carefully. He shared stories of his own life, of struggles and challenges he had faced, allowing her glimpses into his world. She listened attentively, learning that he too had known hardship, loss, and moments of uncertainty. These shared experiences, though different in many ways, created a bridge between them, a connection that transcended the barriers of language, culture, and circumstance. Through these stories, she began to understand that kindness and trust could exist even in a world that often seemed cruel. Despite the growing connection, she remained cautious. Her past had taught her that danger could appear when least expected, and she was acutely aware of the power dynamics surrounding her. Yet, the cowboy's consistency, his patience, and his genuine interest in her well-being slowly eroded the walls she had built around her heart. She began to allow herself small moments of openness, sharing her thoughts, asking questions, and even laughing softly at his gentle humor. These moments, though fleeting, were precious, a reminder that life could still hold warmth, connection, and possibility. One day, he helped her learn a skill she had long admired but never practiced: riding a horse confidently. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement as she mounted the animal, remembering the lessons of her childhood while trusting his guidance. Step by step, with patience and encouragement, she learned to control the horse, feeling the freedom of movement and the exhilaration of balance. For the first time in a long while, she felt a thrill of independence, a reminder that strength could coexist with vulnerability. The experience deepened her trust in him and reinforced her sense of self. Through their growing bond, she began to see a future she had not imagined. Life, which had seemed confined and harsh, now held glimpses of possibility. She started to imagine a world where kindness, respect, and partnership were possible, where she could navigate her circumstances without losing herself. This hope was fragile, but it was powerful, a guiding light that gave her courage and purpose. She realized that her past experiences, her resilience, and her careful observation had prepared her for this moment. She could now envision a life shaped not only by survival, but by connection, respect, and shared growth. As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened in small, meaningful ways. He continued to offer guidance, encouragement, and quiet support, never seeking to control her but instead recognizing her autonomy and intelligence. She, in turn, responded with trust, effort, and attentiveness. Together, they built a bond that was based on understanding, patience, and mutual respect, a bond that transcended the harshness of their surroundings and offered a glimpse of something new: companionship and partnership. Through all of this, she maintained her inner strength and her sense of self. She did not rely on him for her identity or her survival. Rather, she found in him a partner who respected her abilities, her intelligence, and her spirit. This dynamic was crucial, as it allowed her to grow emotionally while maintaining the independence that had carried her through the darkest times. She realized that trust and connection could exist without surrendering oneself, and that true partnership was built on respect and understanding. In the quiet moments when the day's work was done, they would sit together and share stories, laughter, and occasional silences filled with understanding. These moments were simple, yet profound, offering a space where she could be herself without fear or pretense. She began to recognize that life could hold beauty and connection even in the midst of hardship, and that the bonds we form with others can be a source of strength, courage, and hope. Her feelings for the cowboy, though initially cautious and reserved, began to deepen into something more profound. She admired his patience, his respect for her autonomy, and his ability to see her as more than her circumstances. She felt a growing warmth in his presence, a sense of safety and companionship that had been absent for so long. And though she still carried the weight of her past, she allowed herself to imagine a life where trust, connection, and even love could coexist with strength and resilience. Through this evolving relationship, she learned important lessons about human nature, trust, and partnership. She understood that kindness and respect could coexist with strength, that connection could be built through patience and observation, and that even in a world that had often seemed cruel, moments of warmth and understanding were possible. These lessons were invaluable, preparing her not only for her current circumstances, but also for the future she had yet to face. The girl's life, once defined solely by survival, now held the beginnings of hope, partnership, and possibility. She had discovered that even in a world of hardship, relationships built on respect, trust, and understanding could transform one's experience. The cowboy had become a guiding presence in her life, offering support, patience, and recognition of her inner strength. Through him, she began to envision a future that was not only about endurance, but about connection, growth, and the possibility of love. And so, the girl moved forward, carrying the lessons of her past, the resilience she had cultivated, and the hope she now nurtured. Her life had been shaped by hardship, but it was also beginning to be shaped by connection, respect, and the quiet strength of partnership. She had discovered that even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, moments of warmth, understanding, and love could exist. And in these moments, she found the courage to continue, the hope to dream, and the strength to embrace the possibilities of the future. Time moved forward, and with it came changes that the girl had once only dreamed of. Her bond with the cowboy had grown steadily, built on trust, patience, and mutual respect. But life, as she had learned through hardship, required both courage and timing. The world around them shifted in ways that opened doors to freedom, yet those doors required careful steps and thought. She had spent so long surviving, learning, and observing that now, the challenge was to embrace a new life, one she had to actively shape for herself. The first sign of real change came slowly. Her captors began to show less interest in controlling her, and circumstances shifted as the cowboy's influence became more noticeable. He had quietly advocated for her, subtly ensuring her well-being whenever possible. His presence was steady, a constant reassurance that she was not alone in navigating this complex, sometimes threatening world. She began to sense that the opportunity for freedom was approaching, and with it, the possibility of a life built not on survival alone, but on choice, respect, and partnership. When the moment finally came, it was both unexpected and transformative. She was granted the chance to step away from the people who had held power over her, and for the first time in years, she could decide her own path. The feeling of standing on the edge of freedom was overwhelming, exhilarating and frightening at the same time. She looked around at the open land, the wind carrying memories of her childhood, and realized that she was finally able to move forward without fear of immediate threat. This was not only liberation from captivity, but the first step toward reclaiming her identity and life. The cowboy was there by her side, not as a guide to control her, but as a companion who had earned her trust and respect. He offered support, advice, and encouragement, but he allowed her to make her own decisions. She realized that the bond they had formed was unique, a partnership built on equality, understanding, and shared experience. She had learned to trust him, not blindly, but because he had consistently demonstrated care, patience, and integrity. This trust allowed her to step into freedom with confidence, knowing that she had an ally rather than a master. With freedom came new challenges, but she faced them with the skills, intelligence, and resilience she had cultivated over the years. She learned to navigate life outside the confines of her previous circumstances, making decisions that shaped her own future. She discovered that her inner strength, honed through hardship, was her most valuable asset. Every choice she made was informed by her experiences, her observations, her patience, her ability to adapt, and her deep understanding of people. She realized that she could create a life that honored both her past and her dreams for the future. As she began to build this new life, the relationship with the cowboy deepened in meaningful ways. They worked together, shared stories, and supported one another through the challenges of daily life. Their bond evolved from trust and respect into something more profound, a quiet, steady love that had grown naturally over time. She admired his strength, his kindness, and his ability to see her as an equal, while he admired her resilience, intelligence, and courage. Together, they formed a partnership that was based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and deep understanding. She began to see herself not as a victim of her past, but as a survivor and a creator of her own destiny. Every day, she exercised the autonomy she had long been denied, making choices that reflected her values, intelligence, and aspirations. She learned that true freedom was not merely the absence of control, but the presence of the ability to shape one's life with intention and care. This realization was empowering, reinforcing the lessons she had learned throughout her journey about patience, observation, and resilience. The cowboy and she shared moments of joy, laughter, and discovery that slowly transformed her understanding of life and love. They rode together across the open land, feeling the wind on their faces and the freedom beneath their feet. They worked side by side, solving problems, caring for animals, and building a life rooted in cooperation and respect. In these moments, she experienced the beauty of life beyond survival, the satisfaction of achievement, the delight of shared humor, and the comfort of companionship. These experiences allowed her to envision a future where she could thrive emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Her past, while filled with hardship, became a source of strength rather than a weight. She drew upon her childhood lessons, her resilience during captivity, and the skills she had cultivated to navigate challenges effectively. She realized that every step of her journey had prepared her for this new chapter, allowing her to approach life with wisdom, confidence, and grace. Her experiences had shaped her into a person capable of love, empathy, and leadership, qualities that allowed her to flourish in ways she had never imagined. As the days turned into months, her bond with the cowboy evolved into a deep, enduring love. It was a love that had grown naturally, forged through shared experiences, mutual respect, and understanding. She no longer feared vulnerability because she knew that her heart was safe with someone who valued her as an equal. They shared dreams, supported one another's growth, and celebrated both small and significant achievements. This love became a foundation for the life she had long yearned for, a life of partnership, connection, and shared purpose. Eventually, they chose to formalize their bond, becoming husband and wife in a ceremony that honored both their histories and their shared future. For her, this was not a return to the constraints of the past, but a step into a life defined by choice, equality, and mutual respect. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had navigated every hardship, preserved her identity, and arrived at a place of love and partnership. The marriage symbolized not only personal joy, but also the culmination of years of resilience, courage, and hope. Life together was not without its challenges, but they faced them as partners, drawing on the lessons of patience, understanding, and cooperation they had learned throughout their journey. They built a home that reflected their values, worked together to care for the land and animals, and nurtured each other's growth. She found joy in the simple moments, the warmth of shared meals, the laughter of conversation, and the quiet comfort of knowing she was valued and respected. These daily experiences reinforced the power of partnership, trust, and love in shaping a meaningful life. Through this transformation, she understood the profound truth that her identity and spirit could not be taken from her. Even in the darkest moments of captivity and hardship, she had maintained her inner strength, observed the world with intelligence, and preserved her sense of self. These qualities allowed her not only to survive, but to thrive in a new life built on freedom, respect, and love. She realized that resilience, patience, and hope were not abstract concepts. They were tools that had carried her through adversity and allowed her to build a life of purpose and joy. In reflecting on her journey, she recognized the extraordinary growth she had experienced. From a young girl living freely in the Apache lands, to a child forced into captivity, and finally to a young woman forging a new life, she had navigated experiences that would have broken many others. Yet through every challenge, she had preserved her dignity, cultivated resilience, and maintained hope. Her story was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of courage, patience, and perseverance in overcoming adversity. The cowboy remained a steadfast presence throughout, offering support, partnership, and love without diminishing her autonomy or identity. Together, they demonstrated that true partnership is based on respect, equality, and shared values. Their life became a living example of how love can grow through trust, patience, and understanding, even in the aftermath of hardship. Through their relationship, she learned that strength and vulnerability could coexist, that love could flourish without control, and that a meaningful life could be built through cooperation and mutual respect. As years passed, she continued to thrive in her new life. She carried the lessons of her past into every decision, every relationship, and every challenge she faced. She nurtured her family, supported her community, and embraced the freedom and responsibility she had earned. Her experiences had shaped her into a person of wisdom, empathy, and resilience, someone capable of navigating life's uncertainties with grace and courage. Her story became one not only of survival, but of transformation, empowerment, and enduring love. In the end, she had achieved what she had once only imagined, a life defined not by captivity or fear, but by freedom, choice, and partnership. She had turned a journey of hardship into a story of triumph, building a life filled with love, respect, and fulfillment. The girl who had once been taken from her home and thrust into an unfamiliar, harsh world had emerged stronger, wiser, and capable of creating a future of her own design. Her journey was a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and the human spirit's capacity to overcome adversity. And so, she lived fully in her new life, embracing the love she had found, the freedom she had earned, and the future she had courageously claimed. Her story was no longer just one of survival. It was a story of transformation, of the beauty that can emerge from hardship, and of the profound strength that comes from maintaining hope, dignity, and courage in the face of adversity. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a woman who shaped her destiny, built a life of partnership and love, and demonstrated the enduring power of the human spirit.